Great. So just start recording. So welcome, Rajiv.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to CPO Track. You and I met at a dinner last year, and we had some very interesting chats about healthcare and the complexity and how hard it is to scale a health company and, making it profitable and all that. And to be honest with you, that was before I launched CPO Track. And in my head, I thought about that, I was like, I have to invite Rajiv for one of my interviews. So this is before I even started the brand. So I'm very happy that that wish became a reality and you agreed to come on this platform. So many, many thanks.
No worries. It's nice to be here and yeah, just talk a little bit about what we're doing. So I don't often get time to do that and get questions. And if I can really be helpful from what I've learned, that's what I'm here to do as opposed to anything else.
Absolutely. So we'll just start with your career in general. So I mean, I have analyzed your career a little bit. I think it's a very interesting career you've had so far. You've got a degree in maths. You've started your career in investment banking, mostly fintech, I would say, right? Fintech and big banks. And then suddenly you moved into product, and then you're in healthcare now. So you've done various things along the way. So everyone has a journey. I think every executive, you're a co-founder as well. So we'd love to hear your personal story and career story and what led you to where you are today.
It's a great question. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure there's much rhyme or reason to what I did in my career. So if I think you mentioned when we were preparing for this, just to think a little bit about where I started. And, if I look back at when I was very young, maybe 16, I did have this sort of broad ambition that I'm going to go and build something, whether that was, a large company or a small company, I didn't know, but I had to. I think that's probably influenced quite heavily by my heritage. Most of my family owned businesses. So there's this sort of, pride in building your own business at some point. But if I look back at it, I also at 16 said I'm going to travel around the world. At 18, did a gap year, did that. I also said I'm going to go and work in banking for 5 years. So I think I just set these kind of sort of arbitrary goals for the next step. And I would say that actually the journey into product and what I'm doing today it's really back to that thing that Steve Jobs said, right? When you look back, all the dots match up. But when you look for, like when you were there, you don't know why they did. So if I pull on those threads, yes, I did banking, but I did it on the tech sector. So, I was in IBD at UBS, so investment banking, and really worked with the likes of Rightmove, Money Supermarket, Ocado. So that was a great grounding in sort of the fundamentals of business. You're right, I did a maths and physics degree, so I had some sort of analytical bias. I'm very techie in my nature. My parents have a care home, so they've run that for 30 years. So I've been in a care home with older people who are supported in this type of care. And then somewhat later after my bank career, I pivoted into entrepreneurship broadly. I tried to build my own business. That was a really quite a bad failure to start with. Not a problem I was particularly passionate about. Worked with my friend, which was a great formative experience in product, but actually that wasn't a great relationship. And then over time, morphed into more and more product leadership. And that happened much later in my career. So again, back to your point, like all of these things came together much later, wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to do something with impact, being in technology, and also finding product and technology to be my kind of my super strength, as it were, in terms of executing. And that's led us to Birdie, where it is today.
So you mentioned your parents owning a care home. I didn't know that. That's super interesting. Did you ever want to be in the medical side of things rather than tech side of things?
No, no, no. For me, absolutely not. I've got friends that are doctors, and I definitely considered it, but I'm also one of those people that needs extreme things. So I would have probably been in A&E or something crazy like that. And to be really honest with you, my dad's an accountant. So I actually started my early career in ASOS. So at 18, I was very lucky to get an internship at ASOS. There was sort of 4 or 5 of us that got that opportunity. And all my dad could convince me to do was to become an accountant. And so that's actually how I ended up in banking, somewhere in the middle of the two. I'm not sure that was so. No, I was always going to be in business, technology, etc. I think healthcare, it stems for me from where can you have the biggest leverage on like social problems. And I think there was climate, there's education, there's healthcare. And so healthcare was the one where I have some proximity to. And that's really the reason I got involved. There's no other good reason for why I'm in healthcare. That being said, my co-founders, Abid and Max, are much more mission driven. So, Max has been focused on fighting sort of global AIDS and sort of drug sort of Amazon.com drug delivery across the world. That's where he spent his time. And Abid, my co-founder, worked to Save the Children. So that's actually come much more from my co-founders than
Yeah.
me in business.
So let's talk about that then. You mentioned your co-founders, but actually you were not, you were not the co-founder from day one, I think, right?
No,
Joined
no.
as a VP of product. Yeah, so it's quite a fascinating story because most co-founders I have met at least have been with the company from day one. Like they have started the career, right? They have started the company. I haven't met actually that many who've joined slightly after, but still got to be the co-founder, let's say. So I think that's really fascinating. Tell us a bit more about that journey.
Yeah, it's not common. I mean, maybe you have to go a bit further back. So I left, so I basically came back from traveling at the sort of mid-20s, tried to build my own startup, and that didn't really work. So went to WorldPay, which was a contract, and then spent 18 months there, and was always looking for that next opportunity to build a startup. Then thought, okay, I've got a really good idea. I'm going to go and build it. And as usual, far too over optimistic, not humble enough about what I didn't know, and spent like 8 months and I think actually 12 months of my own money building a company called Bond, which was the idea of managing your payments within a restaurant and splitting the bill, which is kind of common over COVID, but prior to COVID was not really a thing. This was pre kind of Apple Pay card. That didn't really work out. And so I tried another startup and eventually ended up being ASOS, Yieldify for a little while. And that's where I really learned product and scale up, etc. Next step, that didn't really work out, went to ASOS, but always in the background, looking for the next opportunity, the next opportunity. So I met like 3 or 4 different founders throughout this whole journey of ASOS. And eventually at the back end, I met Max and Birdie. I think what was interesting in all of that experience, and I'm going to lean into the product, I think there's a lot of people that want to build great businesses, but the kind of the product mindset, and I use that less as a product competency, is something that I think you really have to hone over time, right? User centricity, really challenging the data that you're getting, setting visions and strategies, thinking much more about the overall long-term vision that you have for your product. So the reason that was important at Birdie was that I think in the early days there was a very clear company vision, but how to translate that into a product that could, yes, be commercially successful, yes, could have impact, and then could be the foundation of a future, opportunity, was something that I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to help solve. And that's why I think there was this like late stage co-founder opportunity, because they needed someone that had that skill set. And I think there was also a lot of humility from the team that they respected what that skill set could bring alongside a technology person, a more, I would say, a CEO, a vision driver, and then a commercially minded, co-founder. So there was 4 of us in total, and I was kind of fitting that piece. And then, like, I guess any good band that's put together, there's a bit of luck, right? You gel with everyone, get on, and you start doing really good work. That's luck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially for startups, and you guys are obviously VC backed and you have some very impressive VCs behind you. So like for the sake of the audience, I'm sure people are curious, like how hard has it been for you in the last 2 or 3 years? Just you
Right.
can be honest with us, like how hard
Yeah,
has it
in
been
general,
to
I think about this a lot, right? I think especially in the climate we're in right now, where a lot of VC-backed businesses have, made big redundancies, downscaled. Some have actually, been wiped from existence. I think the latest is 23andMe, right? Where you look at it in terms of the amount of money it raised. If people don't know, 23andMe is this like kind of
Yeah,
gene testing
yeah.
company that's in the US. And if you've looked at the stock market, it's going through some really turbulent times. So it makes me think a lot more about what kinds of businesses should get VC funding. And there's this one article that I remember reading from, I think, Mark Andreessen. I think the best VC-backed businesses are the one where you have a long-term vision of where you're going, and you can prove, you need the money to prove that out over time, but you're already quite confident. I actually think a lot of businesses get that money too early, and they haven't got the confidence in themselves. And then you're kind of constantly running after the growth, the ambitions, the trajectory that the VC needs you to be in. And so, I'm much more, if I was ever to do this again, and maybe I never will, I would be much more careful about when I would raise that money and for what kind of business. Now, in the case of Birdie specifically, I think we did have some quite good thoughts about that. We're in a vertical SaaS business. And maybe I'll touch on Birdie in just a minute, but that's already got really good returns for a VC. We then have all the data we're collecting around this population that can drive quality of care for them. That could be another, high growth business. So there's multiple layers to our product strategy. And actually, if I think about it, when I wrote my first slide, almost like week 4 into the Birdie journey, I had some of those ideas there. So I think that was enough confidence. Now, would I realistically have validated some more of that earlier on? Probably before raising, funding. But that's the reality. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think that you've touched upon some very interesting points here. And I don't know that how many founders are in this call, but we get a lot of founders who message me privately and saying they are product people. They've come from product backgrounds and now they're founder for different reasons. And then there are a few who are bootstrapping and they want to have some sort of a P&L before they go out there to investors. And then there are a few who have a concept in their head and nothing more. So from your experience, if you could redo it, relive it, and the Birdie experience as well, like at what point did you guys go to the investors for your first
Yeah,
round?
I mean, there's a little bit of history with Birdie that it was kind of within a sort of incubator. So there was already some
Okay.
funding, a bit more than you would normally get if you were starting from scratch. Not crazy amount. I would say it's a seed round. And I think I would definitely get a seed round or my own money, and I would prove out some of my hypotheses
Mhm.
start with. And I'd give myself a reasonable time frame, like a year, 18 months, etc., because you can't rush that.
Yeah.
And we sort of did that within this. I think only when you've got that, like you said, the confidence that you've kind of disproven many of your core hypotheses or proven many of your hypotheses is when I'd go and get that funding to fuel it. So in the case of Birdie, maybe specifically, I think we could have. Well, we actually did. If you look at the time period between when we started and our series, it was a reasonable time period actually, and we built a lot of product in that period very very quickly, and we showed commercial traction. I think that's the other thing, that when you come from more of a product mindset, um, yes, you're very user centric, you're focused on the technology, but the commercial side is something that I observe in product management is not always the strongest thing I've observed, and something that I had a lot of because I was I guess, in banking. And that was something we really proved at the beginning very, very quickly, like PMF, but with, healthy-ish
Mm.
financials, unit economics. I think once you've got those two or three things,
Yeah.
then you can go with the story. And actually, I personally think the later you can leave that,
Yeah.
with the better the metrics,
Yeah.
much better for you as a business. You're going to get better terms. You're going to get better VCs generally. So um, that's what I would advise. I mean, that's very hard to do, by the way. I'm not saying that's easy at all.
No, no, absolutely. But that is that is something that I have noticed as well. And I think once you've shown, that you have a PMF and you have paid customers and loyal customers, I think it's much easier to kind of show the story than to have just a concept and a few slides and
Yeah.
hypothesis, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you guys started in 2017. I consider, like, for the London startup scene, I think 2015, 2016, 17, where that was like the golden period in general. I think some of the top companies, most exciting companies came out during that time. So how were you guys different? Because, I know about you guys, your very kind of sustainable growth strategy that you guys have. It's
Yeah.
never been too crazy, right? Even your marketing has been quite, I don't know, conservative in many ways, I would say. So how come you guys were different from some of your peers?
And when you say peers, just to be clear, is you talking about some of the kind of very
Any
well-known?
sector. Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be any
I,
sector.
I
Yeah.
think I think one is, you got to be honest about the sector we're in. We're in age tech, dealing with older people who are at home. It's the long lost cousin of the NHS in reality. So again, maybe I should take a pause and just give a bit of context of what Birdie is and how it fits in. So um, we all know that we're in a crisis when it comes to healthcare, particularly in the UK. The NHS is under a massive, massive amount of stress. And the reality is that is down to an aging population that needs to be better supported at home to live happier, healthier, longer. If we can do that, sorry, I didn't have that. If we can do that, then we can reduce the burden on the NHS, but also have better quality of outcomes to those older people, and also support the independent family members that are looking after them. So that's kind of where the mission has come from. The social care sector is just not very well talked about. I don't know if people remember, but like Matt Hancock used to walk around with a care badge on his shoulder over COVID, because we had to remember to clap for those people as well as just the so I think, to your point, like, it's just not a very sexy sector to talk
Yeah.
about. It's a B2B SaaS business, which means we're selling to lots of small providers. It's not something that inherently looks like it's going to scale
Yeah.
immediately. That being said, if you look at great VC-backed SaaS businesses, it takes them like 7 to 10 years to get to those massive,
Yeah.
valuations. I know you said 2017, but I think I joined in 2018, first product 2019 when we
Mm.
pivoted to SaaS. So for me, we're kind of five-ish years into that
Mm.
journey. and from a growth perspective, we're doing well, despite all the other uncertainties and sort of startups that have gone up and down and things like that.
And how has product changed within Birdie during, because you joined the company when they were like 4 or 5 people, and then you've scaled the team and the business has scaled as well. So how has your leadership changed in all these years?
Oh yeah, I mean, completely different. So like I'm probably, as my co-founder told me, I'm probably one of those 0 to 1 problem solver kind of product people to start with. So I'm as much a founder as I probably am a product person. So that's the first thing to say. At the very beginning, my responsibilities were vast. I was doing CEO responsibilities. I was thinking about OKRs. I was thinking about driving the whole company, financial models. I've done it all. On product specifically, when I joined, we essentially had a login page and a few things happening on a mobile app. And around me, I know there's a couple of things that I need to be successful as a CPO or product leader. One, clearly an engineering team that is can execute very effectively. And there's two parts to that. One is having the engineering talent. You do need an incredibly good engineer, architect, etc. But the second part is then putting in systems and processes around that, whether it's bug management, listening to feedback, prioritizing stories. So there was a lot of that mechanics that was step one. Even as the product person, I was just the EM doing all that work. The second part is having a real problem solver designer. So I always think about these like unicorn designers. I was very lucky that one of my previous experiences, the guy that I hired, he hired me to replace him. And I said to him, look, you're great at product management, but I think you'd be an incredible designer. So why don't you join us at Birdie? And he pivoted his career into being a designer as this sort of unicorn product minded designer who also then could do front end coding. And so that combination of 3 people was enough to get like the Tinder or whatever it might be, why I started. Around that, then it was just about sourcing and hiring excellent talent. Now, I think that's when you're lucky. If you have a network and you built a network, I pulled in someone who was a friend of mine that worked before, who was a good early stage product guy. We were able to attract some good design talent. But again, it was the one thing that changed in the second phase was I tried to coach a lot the team. So a lot of the team here has been coached by me because I think a lot of people think of product as this kind of execution skill, where for me, it's almost about why are we building something? What's the value of it? How have we tested that? I know that sounds, in theory, that's true, but a lot of companies, I'm not sure, do that. So that was phase 2, coaching the team. I think phase 3, which is where we're at now, is being able to really attract outstandingly good talent that is way better than I'm ever going to be in anything, and keeping them excited and around us. So it's almost like these 3 phases. And I've always believed that you have to sort of set the bar a little bit higher than the previous, level you were aiming at and continue to keep pushing that up. I think some people set it either too high and then they get people who are too experienced and, the wrong fit, or vice versa, too low. And then you've got a team that's not able to keep up with the pace that the business has or needs when it's a VC-backed business.
Yeah, I mean, I think talent is something, I don't know if you faced that, Rajiv, but when I was in healthcare, I have faced, it has always been very difficult to get healthcare talent. I don't know why. I think maybe the talent pool is small, or maybe there's not enough people moving around. I just don't know, but it's always been very complicated. And also the onboarding has always been difficult, right? Because it's a complex sector. There's too many systems in, dependencies. If you work with the NHS, that's like another layer of complexity. So how do you navigate in a regulated sector like healthcare? Like, how do you get amazing talent?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, and as I said that story, there's 3 people in my mind that I want to talk about, and they're on a slide I normally show, which is this one of the second hires I remember making. We hired her into our customer success team, but she was an ex-care manager of Age UK. At a young age was making a pivot into health tech. And why I thought it was really interesting we hired her was because she had poor domain knowledge in a way that I was never going to have. If you spent 5 or 6 years in domain, I'm not going to catch up. And I've always believed that in product, you either have domain knowledge that gives you an advantage, or you have like a hunger and a process to like learn these things. So by getting that person, that gave us like, now she's now one of our most senior product managers. And so to your point, I hired people for capability and their context and then coach them the skills. So that's what she did. That same thing. I was very lucky that I hired someone who is an ex-GP who had made a pivot into health tech, been at a number of other startups, and had felt like none of them quite had the vision and the ambition, or she had not got quite the management or coaching she wanted to get. And again, I think over the past, she's been with me for 5 years. I think we've built a very strong working relationship, but it's bi-directional. From her, I get incredible context and empathy for regulation, clinical safety in a way that I will never understand because I've not been on the side of a bed of someone
Yeah.
dying or dealing with those situations. Vice versa, I'm hopefully coaching her in business, product, etc. And then the third person, which comes to my mind, is we hired a guy who was just obsessed with clinical data informatics in a way that I've not met before. And so having an engineer who kind of really deeply cares about this, who was then, I think, who was either going out or has a relationship with a paramedic,
Yeah.
all of these factors then play into how you build a really good product, right? Because you have people who have genuine empathy, and then what you do is you put them close to the customer, and you generally get out their way. I mean, maybe I direct a little bit, but that's kind of my mental model of how I did that.
That is very fascinating because I remember when I was in Babylon, many, many years ago, we used to get, I remember with the CVs, I used to get cover letters for direct applications. And there were a lot of cover letters of people with personal experiences with healthcare. Like how thankful they were to NHS, or someone in their family had a certain sickness and that led them to be in healthcare. It's such a passion-driven sector in
Exactly.
general. Like you would never expect a cover letter like that for like an e-commerce company.
No, no,
I mean,
and
yeah.
even at the beginning, if you go back to like, it's on our website right now, but we have a number of values, and the one that stands out the most, and it's probably, we will be adjusting, but really was aligned with our mission, was we care, right? And actually, we care was not about, we care about each other. It was we care about our mission, we care about the environment, we care about the impact we're having. And so you're absolutely right. I think there's no secret sauce. I think we do good product, but I just genuinely think we care about the problem more than our competitors. And if you do that genuinely, I think you can outcompete if you then have the right talent, execution, tools. But those three come after the fact that you are fully aligned with the mission that you're trying to focus on and going at 100 million miles an hour.
That's amazing. Maybe we can retrospect a little bit. So if you go back to 10 years or whatever, like if you had to
Mm.
relive your career from the beginning, so let's imagine an undergrad version of Rajiv, imagining or making roadmap of his career. Would you do anything differently?
Yeah, in the short term, no. I think if I think about like what I did for undergraduate, which again is another example of where I was like, Dad, I'm doing maths and physics. It's not about, finance or whatever you want me to do. So I think I've had a bit of a rebellious nature in a subtle way for a long time. No, I think the one thing that I think I would have leaned into more, but it was one of those careers that wasn't obvious at the time. And I think banking was a very big deal in that period in the UK, would have been to lean much heavier into technology, product, etc. Like take the leap, go to San Fran, join one of those early stage startups. I think I would have not only would have loved it, I think I would have accelerated my career in that respect. I don't. That being said, who knows? Maybe I would never be doing what I'm doing now. And so it's just that probably that one little thing where I think just doing something that's value creative is much more fun and interesting. And I think that's what building companies allow us to do, right? It allows us to build a future world that no one else can imagine. And I wish I was just doing that a bit earlier. But that being said, I have to say, I think it takes a huge amount of experience to be ready for the journey of founding something.
Yeah.
I have more respect than ever for the one or two people that are like mid-20s that somehow built $1 billion startup. I don't know how you have the emotional intelligence and the maturity to deal with what goes through when you're trying to build a business and be a founder. So I'm quite happy that it's happened at this point in my life. I didn't need it to be any earlier either. I don't know if balanced answer, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I think there's no right or wrong answers, first of all. Also, I don't think there is any right or wrong stages. I have a few friends of mine who are almost at the end of their operating executive careers, and they've started now as a founder, which could be
Yeah.
considered quite late in the books, but actually, maybe not. Maybe that's a better way of doing it.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing I try and say to people, and because a lot of people they don't necessarily ask for advice on building
Yeah.
companies. I think people just need to be honest about what kind of company they want to build. And at the core of that question is, what kind of impact do you want to have, right? So I went through a big part where I was like, oh, maybe I just want to, I don't know, set up some property business and it will pay money. I can do my own thing. Or maybe I will, build something which is a local startup. But actually for me, I love technology. I actually enjoy going fast, high growth, high intensity,
Yeah.
and have impact. So something like this suits me. Whereas I've got plenty of friends where it's like the complete opposite of what they want to do. So I think that's the much harder question that you need to answer,
Yeah.
which is actually that's just the journey you have to go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that you're talking about journey, let's talk about the future then. So there's two things I really want to ask you. One is your personal journey as an executive, where
Mm.
you see yourself in the next few years, what projects you want to pick up, where would we see you more? And the second question is about Birdie as a company, like your journey, like what's next steps for the company?
Yeah, so I think for me, one is I'm far uh, from the executive I want to be. I think there's plenty of development and coaching and learning. I mean, we are a Series B going on to, potentially Series C startup. There's plenty more to go. There's much scale to achieve, and I think that's something I'll be focusing on. How do I do that? I think a couple of ways. One is learning from the network a lot more. I've probably been quite focused on, executing for the last 5 years of my career, as you should be in a startup. So just getting out, talking to people, sharing my ideas, that kind of thing. This is a great example
Yeah.
of that. Um, and then the other part, I think it's a great way to learn is just to stay close to where the innovation really is, whether that's investing, whether that's spending time with other founders. So those are the two areas I'll probably be spending more of my time. That being said, when I say that, it's like the 5% of my time that I have left after everything else. So the 95% will be on Birdie for the next 5 years. And to answer your question of Birdie, I think we're in the UK now. We're going to Germany. We already started going to Germany. There are many other geos that need this sort of technology. Number one, there is many product problems we can solve within the platform we're building for our core demographic or user base, these agencies that provide care. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And then for me, I feel really privileged that we're one of those companies where I can really see how the data we're collecting
Mm,
and this sort of the AI tooling, which is still somewhat nebulous, we can actually apply in a meaningful way. So the picture I want to paint for you is you have 1 million people receiving care in the UK. You have 800,000 care workers or so that are delivering that care. You have 50,000 GPs. And
mm,
that number of GPs is going down because no junior doctor wants to stay in medicine.
yeah.
And so this is an example of where I actually think AI will support better decision making of a smaller group of, highly qualified medical practitioners, maybe with a specialism in geriatrics. Whereas actually what we'll do is we'll enable a much more human to human experience between informal carers, and those that receive care, or the care recipients, as we call them. And so like even having the opportunity to work on a problem like that, I think
Mm,
is something that most people don't get.
yeah.
And that will take the next 3 to 5 years on top of many other ideas we have. So that gives you a bit of a peek of where I think Birdie could go. Now, the reality is, one thing I'll say is it does come down to execution. I think that's the one thing I've taken away from the Birdie journey. And you mentioned what's the last 3 years like being like, it is ruthless, dogmatic, daily execution and grind. That's the only thing I've learned. We get occasional time to talk like this, but the rest is
Yeah.
just doing work.
But that's the reason I don't see you much. I hardly ever see you. So no, that's all good stuff. And I think with that, we can open up to the audience. Thank you so much, Rajiv. It's been a pleasure. We'll come back to you. I still have some more questions towards the end, but I'd like to open it up to the audience. And actually, I think my friend Geraldine, who I call as G, she's a chief people officer. She had to ask you people related questions, obviously. So I love this question. It is for you. It says, how have you attracted tier A talent when the product may not be as sexy as competitors?
That's correct. Maybe I should clarify. I think the product is much more sexy than competitors. It's much easier to use, much nicer, and we hear that. So like our NPS ratings I know that maybe that's a metric to talk about. When we raised our first Series A round with Index, like our NPS was like 45, 50. So we really had worked hard on a quality experience. When I mention sexy, it's like the sector is not.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
that being said, the white paper that's been written from the government around social care was written 2 years after we started the company, and I almost could like look at what we'd written internally and said word for word is very, very similar. So my point here is like we're a very mission-driven business, and I think in this day and age, by having a strong mission that you genuinely believe in, it actually drives incredible talent to you. Like I'm quite blown away by the quality. Now that does require you to have a foundationally good business. Like the really good talent is very smart, so it knows if you're gonna, and they've
Yeah.
been through some bad times. These aren't great. So some combination of you've really got it nailed from a execution point of view, but you've got a mission that's so much more exciting than, you know, just growing whatever other tools out there. That's helped us attract some really great talent. Hope that
That's,
answers.
are you happy with that answer, G?
Yeah, sorry, you've got a junior product manager who's interested. Start them young, pipeline them early. In terms of the sort of the practical aspects, you said Rosie, 1 second, please, darling. From being able to pipeline within and having career changes, I think that's a wonderful way to attract retain talent. There's some beautiful storytelling around that for your employer brand. How about when, you know, a vacancy does come up and you're having to go out there and compete with, you know, some of the big names? How are you ensuring that you're getting that pipeline in, or
Uh,
you know, the
all,
brand itself?
in all honesty, the one learning I've had, and I don't do it enough, and my co-founders tell me, is me and my co-founder spend most of our time networking in LinkedIn. Like, I literally have to go out and act like these people are so much more important than anything I've ever talked about in my life, and just attract them to us. So, you know, that's we are looking at the moment. You'll see we're looking for a new head of product design, and I have either gone through the network, gone through advisors, you know, gone to my investors, also gone to LinkedIn, and as a result, I've created that pipeline. So there's nothing that's going to stop that. You just have to put the effort, find those great talents. I will say, and I think I can genuinely say this, having now done it, product and design talent that is like high caliber, there is just not loads of it, because I think there's a lot of perception of what products should be from the books and, you know, example, and then a lot of people get groomed in that. Best example I can give you as a very practical, I was having a conversation with someone from Spotify who was explaining to me that if everyone knows Spotify, there's this kind of model that they shared, which is the tribe model. And if you're in, you probably have heard about it. And he was like, we do none of that. Like, this is just what someone wrote. And the core of that was this idea of autonomy. And actually, autonomy is quite dangerous. So my point is even in the best companies, you can get such a variety, and there's so much misunderstanding of high quality product and design thinking. It's hard to find the people. So you have to just go out there, find loads, interview loads, and then keep a very high bar. So we have a very, very structured interview process. It means that we don't hire anywhere near as quickly as I would like us to, and we're constantly under stress because our teams have to do more of the work. But in the longer term, that pays off.
Wonderful. It's so wonderful to hear about the investment that an executive is putting into hiring and the personal touch. That's what gets the pipeline strong. And, you know, I heard recently about tier A talent will hire tier A talent, or actually tier A plus talent. So it's just so important to get that right. It costs the bottom line and people a lot more in the long run. So it's wonderful. Wonderful. Music to a people person's ear. Thanks for
Thanks for that question, but I think I completely agree. You bring good people in, they'll bring more good people in. It's always a virtuous cycle. I think that's how it works. There is a question from Jennifer. What's the metric that matters at this time in Birdie?
I think there's different ways of answering that question, but like the North Star metric we've had from the very beginning. Again, I remember writing this on a piece of paper is the number of active care recipients, so older people we support on a weekly, monthly, daily basis. So that is now around 65,000 patients, and that's constantly growing. The reason we picked that metric is that it does three things. One is it actually is linked to our revenue because we get paid on a per care recipient basis. Number two, it reminds us of what's most important, which is the care recipient and the focus we have on that. That's the social mission we have. And thirdly, all the data we are collecting is around these care recipients. I really do believe there is huge amounts of data in healthcare that can be transformative in the way we think around general population management, preventative care. And so that was the third lever. So this like single metric becomes a North Star. Now, if you're asking me which metrics we then track in the company, there's 20 KPIs, we have OKRs, we have lots of different metrics on our squads. The other model that's really worked at the squad level is then having a single North Star metric and a North Star vision for each squad. which ladders up into this sort of overall North Star one, and then using OKRs as a way of trading off between whether a squad is focused on, the North Star vision of their product, or they're focusing on business critical objectives that we need to deliver in a certain time frame. So we use both of those. That's something we're also maturing on. I think I think there's ways of getting there quicker, but I think some companies have to go through the learning curve themselves of what works, what doesn't, and every company is slightly different. So
yeah, no, I was focused on what's the single most important number to your growth, which
is the North, the economic care recipients.
Yeah, exactly. So no, thanks.
I think of course, health being a complex sector, how do you balance innovation? I think that's a question as well. How do you strike a balance between innovation and pace in a regulated sector like health?
Yeah, it's hard. I'm going to just be really honest and say that is probably the single thing I struggle with the most. I think in the beginning days, I was very lucky that the CTO and our original CTO and co-founder was very, very hot on regulation and data privacy and clinical safety. So we always used to talk about privacy by design, data safe, data privacy by design, and I think that became a motto. And underlying that was like, robustness and stability of our platform. So that was foundational. And I think that we made culturally a very important topic. I think on top of that, when you add on people, as I mentioned, a couple of those people from care or from healthcare, they really empathize with, like, it's not okay to even have, 1 minute of downtime where a medication's missed. And I would go as far as say, when we have had instances like that, we've literally had some of the team, including myself, staying up till 2 a.m, phone calling every care manager where there was an issue, and being quite surprised to realize that all the care managers didn't even realize or didn't know, because the prevalence of issues when you're in a paper-based system is so much more than a digital system. So I think that was core in our empathy. What does that mean? What it also meant is we had to just be really good at executing fast and high quality. And there's nothing that can get away from that. Right now, what does it mean? We need to think a bit differently. We have to scale our processes. So we're actually we have a clinical safety officer, we have a data privacy officer, we have that within our chief of staff COO area. They are a kind of healthy challenge on the pace and what we do on the product side. And I think the longer term model is you have product driving innovation with an empathy for this, but you have some controls. So a good example here is we are going to now invest in people to monitor regulation, whereas historically our product managers were reading all the regulation. You just can't scale that way. But I think it starts with, it's back to that point. If you're clear on your mission and you're clear on how you're going to get there and you're thinking about the longer term, you're not going to compromise on regulation. Like it would kill our business if we mistake. So yeah, it's a balance. It changes as we go.
And the next question is just very nicely aligns to what you're talking about scaling. How have you found maintaining your culture as you have scaled as a business? In a number of businesses I've been part of, this has been a tricky challenge. So the question is from Alistair.
Yeah, I would say it's as challenging as anywhere else. We're actually going through, a rethinking of our values. I would say what I've typically been told in the past is when you get from sort of up to about 50 or maybe let's say 80, it works. You can keep the culture. It's kind of still small, tight knit. When you get from 80 to 180, you need to sort of change that culture. You may need to put some more formality into it, more processes, better culture documents. And then you have to do that again as you get to 200 plus and maybe even 1,000 plus. What I think we've done successfully is to stretch that a little bit. So we haven't really adjusted our culture meaningfully, I think, to about 150, because I think we'd spent actual time thinking about those values and behaviors. I think now, though, we've definitely reached a tipping point where I can feel that we need that slightly more intentional thinking around our culture and our values, because we are moving from startup to scale up. And I think the expectations, my personal view at least, is the expectations of employees in a scale up is to be in a more professional environment, whereas most people joining a startup expect a little bit of chaos and to be part of the formation of your culture. That being said, my sort of definition of culture is, what are the behaviors that the team are taking when I'm not telling them directly? And would they be in line with the behaviors that I have and we should have as a company? And the way I try and do this, and I think it's quite a topical example, when we were very early, we did a lot of fundraising activities or like giving back activities as part of the We Care mission. So I personally only started donating blood at the beginning of Birdie because one of the engineers did, and now I've donated it 10 times. I now am more careful about what I put in the rubbish to recycle because of someone at Birdie. So these things are things that I saw at the beginning. As I've observed that being lost a little bit, I've been thinking about how to instigate that back in our company. So, for example, we measure all our climate impact on an annual basis, and now it's become part of our routine. On Friday, I set up 2 charity events at scale to reinforce some of those cultural values. So I think you just need to solve the problem differently for the values you want. But it is tricky. I think it is easier because we are a mission-driven business. And so there's this trade-off between, the mission and then I don't know, commerciality. Like they are one and the same. Again, just my learning so far.
Yeah, no, that's very fascinating. I mean, the thing is there are a lot of companies who call themselves mission driven, like that's what the pitch deck says, let's say. But when you dig deeper into the actions, you don't see that. So I'm very happy to hear, like I had no clue about your, some of the things that you mentioned, your Fridays, like we didn't know about these things. Maybe you should shout out a bit more.
Yeah, but I think we're also, I mean, that's probably the one downside. When you are mission driven, there's a very humble group here.
Yeah.
And I think, back to your point, we're like, why do people not know about us? Because I think we're just going to be one of those companies that just dogmatically executes on problems day in, day out, and, drives that across the industry. And I think for me, that's also, I really think about success in the sort of 10, 15 year horizon. It's not the 3 year spin out something exit. But that's kind of what we wanted to build as a company.
Yeah, yeah. I think very recently I saw a podcast or something by the CEO of Uber, and he said excellence takes time.
Yeah.
And that is so deep, even though such a short sentence, but that's so true because these things, they do take time. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. I mean, I literally sent a note to the team the other day, and it was all about quality, which is an area that I really wanted to focus on it. And it was from, I think it was Aristotle, but it's like quality is a habit. It's very simple, but it's just like, most things, it's just consistency and habit. Sorry, I'm getting very philosophical. I'm sorry if that was off topic for everyone here, but
No, I think people love this stuff. We still have some more time. So, I have some more questions for Rajiv, but if you guys have any other question, feel free to ask him or just write it on the chat.
please do.
No questions? Okay,
I have a question.
Go for it.
Hi, great insights, by the way. Thanks so much. How is the relationship with the healthcare providers have been? I'm coming from working for pharmaceutical companies. They're typically the departments we've been working with have not been that advanced in terms of digital transformation. Let's put it that way. So how was the relationship with the healthcare providers? Were they like open to collaborate, interested that you want to solve a problem for them, or they've been more conservative? How was that developed over the years?
Yeah, bit of context, right? So in most countries, particularly European countries, this sort of healthcare at home piece, this social care, they're private companies. So they're normally a local, often a local care manager decided to build their own company, hired 50 carers, supporting their local older population. So I think that helps in one regard. There isn't this huge, massive brands that we have to work with, or frankly, when I say that, I really mean the NHS, which can sort of SWAT and start up from, day one. So that leans then into how did we approach it? So when I first started, I really wanted to get really close to the customer because we weren't experts in healthcare. So day one, I got us to dog food the product, but what we did much more than that is we stopped calling them customers. We call them partners. Like I got very dogmatic about the word partner because I was like, if they're partners, then they'll treat us like like that, and we will be able to work together. And why is that important? Because if you really think about care agents, they have 2 parts. They have the people they've got, and then they've got the operating playbook. That's what you hear from the agency. And the operating playbook is essentially the processes and procedures that make sure you deliver high quality care regularly and and grow your business. If you think about what technology does, it builds you a playbook. It's kind of the inherent thing technology does. So by being partners, we're learning from them, building the playbook, vice versa, we're giving them the tools to have a bigger impact. And because our mission is to drive the quality of care, not just to sell them a product, like genuinely, I really care about the 60,000 care recipients and then the revenue, right? The revenue is a means to that end. I think it makes us like really deeply connected on that mission. But I was having a conversation with one of my advisors, a lot of people don't have that conversation. They just don't have the basic conversation of like, what are we both trying to achieve? And what's your part in this and what's my part in this? So if you go on our website, we actually, I'm pretty sure there's a page where it says, what does it mean to be a partner and how do we build products? And we have a public roadmap that actually moves, which most companies don't have. So, then it gets enacted in certain things we build around that, I guess, that core belief. I hope that.
Thanks so much.
That's true. That is very true. There's one more about, this could be quick. So what are the top 3 skills that makes a great founder?
Oh my God. I don't know about skills. That I think I tell you the top 3 things that I've learned that maybe make it manageable. I think top skill is sheer resilience. I mean, if you look back at, yes, people are looking at the 5 years of my Birdie journey, but I spent 10 years from leaving banking and it was not great, all of it. And it was, it was not a great ride throughout. So I think pure resilience, number 1. Number 2, I would say that ability and that desire to imagine a future world and challenge the status quo. I know it's a bit vague, but really like you've got to be able to think about something a bit
Visionary, I think, right?
visionary, and I think
Yeah.
So visionary is really important, but also with some sort of practical context of how that can be executed, not just like a crazy idea like how can I get there. And then the third, and if I look back at what's successful for me, like I was always noting people through my career who I thought could be really good in a certain part of the company I built, and I typically reached out to all of them to start with, and brought, I would say, 60 to 70% of them to Birdie to get us going at the beginning. So I think that team building ability to rally people around you to on your vision, solve problems is probably the third. If I was going to say 3, but honestly, I would say resilience is probably like 80% of it. I mean, if you can make it through and keep learning, I really just think, yeah. And if you want to, I mean, sorry, you should be aligned with that resilience.
Yeah. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I don't think everybody can do it, right? Yeah, always hiring. I think you sound like a serial recruiter, like a quiet one, but observing people and just adding them to your pipeline.
I said it's the first thing I said to my product, the lady that joined me. You're always hiring, like you're just always like, and not in a kind of like I need you to work for me, in a kind of like where's the best talent and what have I learned from them and how can I attract them eventually.
Brilliant. Okay, so I can't wait for this. So we have a little tradition here for all the CPO track Zoom events. There's 3 cards. You must have seen these, the Diary of a CEO, very popular Stephen Bartlett cards. You got to pick one, and then you have to answer the question.
I will go for I guess the one that's closest to you.
Okay, which one? This one? Oh, right. This one, right? Okay, cool. Right. Okay. So it's a very philosophical kind of a day because this question is from Jay Shetty.
Wow.
Who would have thought? Anyway, so the question is, if you were on your deathbed and could leave only one lesson behind, what would that be?
Wow.
I know it's a lot.
When you put Jay Shetty and Stephen Bartlett in a room, right? What would I guess the way to answer that is, what do I sort of think about when I'm trying to coach my kids? I think the only thing I keep thinking about is has everyone heard of Ikigai? So this concept of like aligning yourself to like your purpose. So for me, the single biggest thing that I think I would leave as advice, but also try and share with my children is like, and my wife hates this, but like as much as possible, get aligned on what gives you happiness, where you can have impact, where your skills are unique. The sort of the 4 factors of it, because that's going to make you the most productive, happy, and useful human, I would say. Everything else is subsequent to that, which is, by the way, very hard. I think most of us can go through our entire lives trying to figure this question out. So sorry for that deep Monday night thoughts for everyone, but that's what I would say.
I think that's an amazing answer. It's such a tough question, but you answered it very well. And with that note, I think thank you, everyone. It's been such a good session. 60 minutes, I think that has flown away. I would love to see you guys at our next event. We have a in-person event later this month at HEAP in Liverpool Street. It's a women in product event, but then for both the brands, as you know, we welcome everyone. It's highly inclusive. So I'd hope to see all of you there. And I think our next CPO track session like this would be sometime next month. So really, really looking forward to it. Rajiv, thank you so much. It's only Monday. I think I asked you a lot of questions today on a Monday evening, but you are so good. You're fabulous. You should do more of this.
Thank you very much. I'm learning as I go, but it's been great to speak to you. And if I can be helping in any way, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'll see if I can be helpful.
Rajiv's always hiring, as you've heard. So please reach out to him. And thank you so much. You've been a great audience. Amazing questions. Thank you, everyone.
I know.
Thank you. Bye-bye.